Good evening and welcome back to And the Gooby Goes To. It is Monday, January 19th, which means we are just days away from the nominations announcement for the 98th Annual Academy Awards. And in this video, I'm going to be giving you my predictions for all 24 categories for the Oscars. We're going to go through each category in fine detail with the finest comb possible. And I'm going to give my best predictions for how I think these nominations are going to shake out. As we go through this video, let's remember first and foremost, this is all for fun. Obviously, the discourse can be fun on its own, but we want to keep it kind and we want to keep it safe for everybody. But let's have a chat. Let's have a debate. Let's even argue a little bit. You know, we wouldn't be here passionate about these award ceremonies if we didn't all have differences of opinion, varying thoughts about how we think the Academy is going to be voting. If everything was clear cut and just ready to be awarded on the spot from the time a film debuted, we'd have nothing fun to talk about for the entire year. Before we kick off with the first category and start going through my nomination predictions, I want to talk a little bit about what the Academy Awards are, how we got here, and what we know about how this group of people votes both for nominations and for winners, so we can talk about some facts, some fables, and try to understand what's going on as we go through all of this. So Academy Awards, more formally known as the awards presented by the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences, otherwise known as AMPAS, takes place every year. This is going to be the 98th ceremony for the Academy Awards. And the most important thing to probably know is the size of the Academy currently, most importantly, the voting Academy, and how that has drastically changed just within the past decade. So as of this year, there are a little over 11,000 Academy members overall. I think around 10,000 or so of them actually vote and nominate for all the films every year. And they're actively growing. 10 or so years ago, a lot of you might remember the whole Oscars So White debacle that was going on. And it was really because the Academy lacked a lot of diversity. Fewer than 10% of the overall Academy members being people of color. I think only 20% or so, I think actually even less than 20% being women. So since then, they've really gone through great strides to make sure that the Academy is representing a global interest in terms of film and cinema. So the Academy has almost doubled in size in the past 10 years alone. Back in like 2015, 2016, there were only around 5,000 members. And like I said, we're at over 11,000, around 10,000 who are actually voting. So that's a huge population increase. And they've also gone through great lengths to ensure that there are diverse members within the Academy, not just by, race and gender, but also including a lot of international Academy members as well, which is why in the past few years, we've seen so many more international films get recognized more in the sense of just the international film category, where you see international films really breaking into Best Picture and Best Director and some of the acting categories. So a lot of that is due largely in part to the way that the Academy has committed to growing to make sure that they're representing films from around the world properly, and ensuring that there's a true representation of the global population who's putting their input and their voting into these films every year. The next most important thing to keep in mind as it pertains to the Academy and the voting body is the fact that not all 10,000 plus members are voting on nominations for every single category. They are broken up by their respective crafts and trades. Right down to the category, essentially, so everyone pretty much knows that the actors make up the majority of the voting Academy. They're the only group with over 1,000 members. They have around 1,300 right now. So that's over 10% of the voting Academy overall. But, you've got animation, casting directors, cinematographers, directors, makeup artists, musicians, producers, short film experts, sound engineers. So they truly have it broken down where the respective experts in each craft are voting within their respective categories. So you don't have actors who are voting for best sound, voting for best production design in terms of nominations. So they're trying to keep that honed in so that the respective crafts are really getting their due diligence from folks who know those trades the best, and that certain films aren't just being favored across the board by the same population pool of people who might not have the expertise to be nominating within some of those categories. Now, everybody does vote within Best Picture. So that's, by far the largest voting body. All 10,000 plus members will be submitting their ballot for Best Picture nominations. But the reason why I bring that up is because this is why you see certain situations where you think there might be like a snub for a film, and you're like, let's use Barbie as an example, right? So back when Barbie was in the Oscars race, there was a lot of chatter about, oh my God, how did Greta Gerwig not get a Best Directing nomination? But like they gave Ryan Gosling a Best Supporting Actor nomination. That defeats the purpose of the movie and the feminism of it all. Well, and I agree. I think Greta Gerwig should have been nominated for director for Barbie, but that's because the director's branch, which consists of about 500 to 600 members, is doing the nominations for director only. And then again, the actors are voting for the acting nominations. So it's two different groups of people voting for two different things. So you have to keep that in mind as it comes to the nominations. When you see some snubs and surprises on nomination morning, that for the most part, it's what it's coming down to. There are experts within those respective categories that are voting. They aren't talking to each other. They're not voting in the same thing. Again, the only thing that everyone is consistently nominating all together on is for the Best Picture 10. Okay, and the other important thing to keep in mind, so not only do you have your divided groups of experts who are voting in their respective categories, they're filling out their ballot with their 5 in a ranked 5 order. So the order in which they list their favorites within their category matters a lot, because I can't even begin to understand the algorithm and the formula they use to like calculate, who actually gets the nomination. I tried digging into it, and it really hurt my brain. And I think the Academy keeps it very vague for those reasons, especially. But the more number one votes that a film gets, or that a category nominee gets, the more likely it is to get in. So I'll go back to Barbie again as an example. So another snub that people were really upset about was Margot Robbie not getting nominated for Best Actress. And everyone was really confused and really shocked because, she had picked up every major precursor along the way, Critics' Choice, Golden Globe, BAFTA, SAG, but then was ultimately left out of the Best Actress 5 at the Oscars. And the reason for that could have been a lot of people didn't have enough passion for her performance in that film to be putting her at like number 1 or number 2. And instead we're like, you know what? I enjoyed this performance a lot, enough to have it in my 5, but not higher than like number 4 and number 5. So, she could have gotten 4th or 5th place on, say, like 60-70% of the acting branch ballots, but she's getting beat out by people like Sandra Hüller in Anatomy of a Fall, or Annette Bening and Nyad, these people who had like a very passionate group of people behind them who were like, I need to see this person get nominated. I am going to put them at number 1 so that I can do everything I can to make sure they get in this Best Actress 5. So if that makes sense, the order in which your nomination is being listed on the ballot plays a big part in this. And that's something I'm keeping in mind too, as I'm going to be going through my predictions, and we'll talk about it, because I definitely think I have some upsets predicted that people aren't expecting. And I think it breaks down to the fact that there will be some scenarios where certain artists, certain actors, certain films are going to be struggling against breaking past that like lower tier of the nomination ballot, and are ultimately going to get beat out by other films that had the passionate vote at like those big major number 1 and number 2 votes. Lastly, let's talk precursors. So everyone talks about precursors as we lead up to Oscar nominations, and then ultimately the Oscar ceremony in March. And it's important to decipher like what really matters versus like what could just be showing a trend. So what I'm looking at as it pertains to putting together this Oscar nominations predictions list that I have, most importantly, the guilds. There are guild groups for just about every single craft category, costumes, production design, sound, editing, cinematography, you name it, there's a guild for it. Sometimes there's even more than one. So you're looking at those, especially within your production craft categories, because those are the people that are going to be most aligned with the Academy members who are also voting in that category. So you really want to be looking there. Other items, SAG as it pertains to actors, definitely not like a 1-to-1 for sure. And especially in a year like this year where we had no international film representation whatsoever within any of the SAG Actor Award categories. But again, with the actors branch making up the largest population of the voting academy, you're going to look at the Screen Actors Guild, which consists of all actors, who are nominating for those actor awards as well. Other big things, the Producers Guild Award, PGA, trying to help round out your Best Picture 10. But again, you can't rely too heavily on that because it's not common for the PGA 10 to include as many international films as the Best Picture 10 will. Same thing with like the Directors Guild Awards, that helps understand where some of our top contenders are, but very frequently you don't see international directors in that group. This year there are none from any international films that are represented within DGA. And then we also look at BAFTA. BAFTA is very important because BAFTA is essentially the UK equivalent of the Oscars and has probably amongst any of the large like televised award ceremonies, like unlike the Golden Globes, unlike Critics' Choice, the BAFTA voting group is going to be the closest aligned to how the Oscars Academy voting group is going to be. Again, with BAFTA, there is likely going to be like a heavy emphasis on European and especially like UK based films. But on a global scale, they're going to be really close to representing what the Oscar nominations could look like, especially for the fact that, with BAFTA, we have a weird year this year where we don't have the BAFTA nomination specifically yet. Those are coming out on the 27th, but what we do have are the BAFTA long lists, which helps even a little bit more because in pretty much every category, we're looking at the top 10 potential nominees that the BAFTA voting group is looking at. And so we can really look there and say, okay, if something is missing from the BAFTA long list, there's a very good chance that it probably won't get into the Oscar nomination group unless there's like a major other factor that's going to help like get a passion vote in there for it. Another important sort of cheat sheet that the Oscars Academy actually gives us is their shortlist. So we got the Oscar shortlist back in December in 12 different categories. And in those categories, they're broken down into either 10, 15, or 20 potential nominees that could come out of that. So in some of the tech categories like sound, makeup and hairstyling, and then in other categories like Best Original Song, Best Original Score, and then documentary, international film, all of the shorts, we get a condensed group of what the potential nominees are, in large part to help the voting members like focus on what's most important. Because I think knowing like just from my perspective, it would be incredibly difficult to just have I think this year there were a little over 200 films submitted for Oscars consideration this year. So, like, if you're a makeup and hairstylist, voting Academy member, having to think about over 200 different films that are eligible to potentially nominate, that's a very daunting task. So, in some of these categories, there's a specific voting body that helps create these Oscars shortlists to break it down a little bit so that those folks can focus on those 10, 15, or 20 films specifically and make sure that they're giving full attention to those to help craft a very well-educated nomination pool of 5 within those. A couple other factors that I think can vary by year that can be applied as precursors. One being just cultural impact. Is there a film or are there several films that just broke the world on its debut and emerged as just like an awards contender favorite in the year? Spoiler alert, we have more than one of those this year for sure. Are there films that are just running away with awards already? Are there films that have just been talked about as like the pinnacle of cinema success and just should be accoladed for all the success it had? And we've got those this year, but sometimes like you don't have those in certain years, but this is definitely a year where we do have that with more than just one film. Another item to look at sometimes are the European Film Awards. I think they are very applicable this year, not every year, but we'll talk about that in a little bit as we get into some of the categories. But I think something that a lot of folks don't look at are those European Film Awards, and they just happened yesterday. And there are 2 films in particular that we need to look at and that we will be looking at in some categories that I think are going to be mentioned more than once at the Oscar nominations on Thursday morning. And then finally, sometimes you can look all the way back at the spring, the summer, the fall festival season and what films emerged as favorites from the very beginning within their festival debut. Obviously last year, Anora debuting at Cannes back in the spring, sort of lost buzz throughout the year as other films started emerging, but ultimately ended out on top, winning all of the major categories that it was nominated for, aside from supporting actor, but, taking home Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, Editing, and Best Actress for Mikey Madison. And it all started with that Palme d'Or win at Cannes earlier that year. films that debut at TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, whatever the Audience Choice Award is that year. It's pretty consistent that whatever the audience pick is that year is typically guaranteed a Best Picture nomination at least. And I think this year is a year where that definitely applies as well. So sometimes those festival picks can be unreliable, like not this past year, but the year before. The Life of Chuck was the audience award winner at TIFF, but then that film didn't even debut that season, came out this past year, and has made no buzz whatsoever. So yeah, I think that's a good enough summary of what some of our precursors are that we're going to be looking at. And with that, we will dive into our first category. Let's kick things off with a fun category. Let's do achievement in casting. So this is a brand new category at the Academy Awards. It's the first time that a category has been added since 2002, when the Academy added Best Animated Feature to the category lineup. So that takes us from 23 to 24 awards. This is a category where we received a short list from the voting members. And so the 10 films on that short list are Frankenstein, Hamnet, Marty Supreme, One Battle After Another, The Secret Agent, Sentimental Value, Sinners, Seurat, Weapons, and Wicked for Good. So, important thing to keep in mind. A lot of people are wondering about, how is this specifically going to look in correlation with the Best Ensemble Award at the SAG-AFTRA Awards. The most important distinction is that this award specifically is going to the casting director of the respective film, and it is casting directors who are nominating and voting for it. Like I said, casting directors make up their own branch within the voting academy. I think there's under 200 of them. So we don't have a very large pool there. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this goes at the end of the day. So overall, I'm going to have on my nominations breakout, I'm going to have who I think is certain, who I think is semi-safe, who's on the bubble, and who some potential spoilers or wild cards could be. So without further ado, casting achievement. So I have 3 that I think are certain, those being One Battle After Another, Sinners, and Marty Supreme. I think those are One Battle and Sinners being the 2 biggest nomination contenders of the entire year, and I just don't see those struggling whatsoever to pick this one up. Marty Supreme, I think, is the best casting of the entire year. I think a lot of people are going to agree, and I don't think you can argue that the casting of that film was so impressive based on the amount of non-actors that they found, unknown faces that they found, and people who were just so picture perfect for their roles in that time period that it's just undeniable that it was such an achievement in casting directing. So those are my top 3 that I think are certain. Number 4, semi-safe. I've got Hamnet right now. I'm not the most confident on this one. I will say I feel a little bit better on the fact that it did get that Actor Awards Best Ensemble nomination, the fact that it won the Golden Globe Drama Award, and the fact that I think the casting directors group is going to be impressed with the fact of the casting of the children in that film, just based on how important of a role they played and how great they all were. Just from Jacoby Jupe alone should be getting an award for finding that talent for that film and for that role. So those are my 4 that I feel great or somewhat okay about. And then I've got 2 on the bubble here. My 2 that I'm torn between are both international. It is Seurat and it is Sentimental Value. And this is why I brought up the European Film Awards earlier, because Seurat just won the European Casting Directing Award at the EFAs last night. And that film is so centered around the fact of how many non-actors they found to be in that film. And I'm wondering, obviously it's an international film. It's an international film that's not a top player at the Academy Awards this year, but it's also an international film that showed up on quite a few shortlist mentions. But then you have Sentimental Value, which I think will ultimately end up getting the most nominations of any international film on Thursday. And with how acting heavy that film is, I think it was such an achievement in terms of the casting that they did there. So I'm a little bit torn there. And then as a wild card, I also have Weapons up there. Obviously with Weapons, because of different delays from shooting that film, they had to like recast a bunch of it. And that's sort of been the buzz surrounding that film, just the achievement in not only having their original cast, but then like having to recast it as well. The find of all the kids and, just the impressive role that like all the kids were able to play within that movie. So those are the three that I sort of see circling that fifth and final spot. But I am ultimately going to go for sentimental value for my fifth pick here. I'm very, very close to picking Surat. That European Film Award win is very tempting, but at the end of the day, I do think Sentimental Value is going to have a more successful Oscars morning, and I think it's going to get multiple actors nominated specifically as well. And so I'm going to pick that as my number 5. So for casting achievement, I've got One Battle After Another, Sinners, Marty Supreme, Hamnet, and Sentimental Value. All right, next, let's go ahead and get the hardest categories out of the way, that being all 3 of the short film categories. These are notoriously the hardest ones to predict. We really don't get any sort of precursors for them. We get 15 shortlisted in all 3 of the different categories. And it's just a fun game with pundits to try and figure out who's going to get the nomination here. We're normally all very wrong, and we're also typically very wrong on the winner as well. Because, like I said earlier, they kind of just find people who are willing to vote for these, and we just have no idea who they are and what they're into. But here's what I did today that I think is going to work out for me well in terms of predicting these. So for all of the short films in the 3 short film categories, I went through Letterboxd and went and looked at how many people have seen it and what the ratings were. And I was kind of surprised to see how much I think this is actually going to help me out with predicting these. And like looking at Gold Derby, because what happens on apps like Gold Derby too is that, a few people will put their predictions and then everyone just follows suit. And then all of a sudden you have this top 5 that everyone's just like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess these make sense because I don't care enough to try and research and figure out what's going on here. So that's how you get some of these pundit websites with these predictions for the different short films that just make no sense and are very wrong on nomination morning. So starting off with animated short. So the 2 most certain I have are Snow Bear and Playing God. Snow Bear annihilated this group in terms of views. It's got over 11,000. It also annihilated in terms of rating. It's at a 4.3. It's the only film out of all 15 of these that has a 4.0 or higher as a rating. It's the only one over the 10,000 view mark, actually like over the 7,000 view mark. So it's almost double the next highest. It's got another thing you can look at with animated short specifically, Annie Awards, which are an awards group that specifically gives awards to animated films. They do have a short film category, though that's not often the most reliable because sometimes like the nominees and sometimes even the winner aren't even shortlisted for this group. Like only 3 of the, I think 6 Annie nominated short films are in the Oscar 15 shortlist. So it's not always the most reliable, but when you've got the most views, the highest rating, and an Annie nomination, that to me says you're getting in. So Snow Bear for sure. Playing God, the next one, 6,800 views, a 3.9 rating, and looking at like the brief synopsis, it's a claymation style film and it's like a claymation sculpture and it's like a bunch of different, it's like one version of it meeting a bunch of different other versions of itself. It looks really intriguing. I'm kind of excited to watch it, definitely if it gets nominated. So I think those 2 I'm very comfortable putting as a safe nomination. Next up, I've got Butterfly. That one also has over 6,000 views according to Letterboxd and a 3.8 rating. And then I've got The Shyness of Trees, which has about 4,200 views and a 3.9 rating. And then Retirement Plan, which has about 3,200 views and a 3.9 rating. So why does this matter in terms of like, why did I do the Letterboxd situation? Well, to me, I'm thinking, if you go see like which of these short films have been viewed the most, and if there is like a pretty large discrepancy, that to me says, okay, that's very likely then that like these short films have garnered some sort of word of mouth. and that it's very likely that those who are going to be voting in these categories have seen it and like possibly like it as well, enough to nominate it. There's a couple on here that have under 1,000 views and like a very low 3 rating on it, and I'm like, I just can't see somebody within this voting category going for that when it basically, according to Letterboxd, looks like this film doesn't even exist. So those are the 5 I'm going with. There's one for Evergreen on here, which won the AFI American Film Institute Award for animated short film. But again, that's not often a good correlator for like even getting a nomination at the Oscars. So I'm not relying too heavily on that one. 2 that I have as potential spoilers here. I've got Iru, if I'm pronouncing that right, Eiru, and then Huracan. Huracan, I think, is actually most likely the one that I would swap in for another one of these if I had to, just because looking at it, the premise is interesting, and it does seem like a bit more geared towards adults, which I sometimes matters here. Like, I think they sometimes try and avoid the very like kid-friendly short films here, just in terms of taking them seriously. But yeah, so Snow Bear, Playing God, Butterfly, Retirement Plan, and The Shyness of Trees. Those are the 5 I'm going with for best animated short.
You can't see one lay down.
Okay. Thanks, Guy. That was recorded. Yeah. Okay, moving on to documentary short. So, in addition to the Letterboxd study I did on these, you also want to look at what type of subject matter these documentary shorts are focusing on, because the more culturally relevant and topical they feel, the more likely they are that the voting members within this category are going to want to propel those to like a global viewing platform. So with that said, at number 1, I've got All the Empty Rooms. It is by far the most viewed documentary short on this list with 5,800 views, more than double what the next film in line has in terms of views, and it's got a 4.0 rating. And this documentary short is about a guy who does photography portraits of children's bedrooms who were killed in school shootings. So talk about topical, talk about culturally relevant, and something that voting members are definitely going to want to see get propelled to a global viewing platform. So I've got that in very safe at number 1 for getting nominated here. Next up, I've got We Were the Scenery. This is the next most viewed one at 2,600 views with a 3.7 rating. This documentary short focuses on 2 guys who fled Vietnam in 1975 during the Vietnam War, ended up in the Philippines after spending 9 days at sea, and then ended up being background actors in Apocalypse Now. So it just sounds like a very fascinating topic to focus on. I'm definitely very intrigued and interested in watching this, and I'm kind of trusting that the voting members within this category are going to be as well. So I've got that at number 2. Number 3, I have Armed Only with a Camera, The Life and Death of Brent Renaud. So this one, very topical as well. Filmmaker Brent Renaud, killed by Russian soldiers, the first American journalist to die while reporting on the war in Ukraine. And this is about his younger brother, Craig, going on a mission where he had to go recover his brother's body and then recovered all the footage he had got. And it's kind of putting all this footage back together. So again, a very topical situation that sounds very heartbreaking, but also just very interesting to see, what Craig, the brother, was able to recover from this very admirable journalist mission that Brent was on himself. So I've got that safely in at number 3. Number 4, I've got The Devil is Busy. This one has a lot of views as well. It's got 1,900. It's got a 4.0 rating. And this one focuses on abortion. Again, I think a very topical subject that typically makes it into the shorts. Like, honestly, if there's something about abortion on here, it's very likely that it makes it into the short film list. So I feel pretty confident about that one. And then number 5, have All the Walls Came Down. Now, I'm a little torn on my 5th spot here. The reason I picked this one, it focuses on the LA fires from last year. However, it's only got like 500 views. It's got the lowest rating. Yeah, the lowest rating of all 15 films in this short list at 3.2. But that feels very topical enough, especially for, the impact that those fires had on LA and Hollywood and the film industry as a whole. I do feel like voters won't be able to resist putting that up on a platform of some sort, especially since we haven't seen anything come through to the Oscars yet that really touches on the impacts of those fires. So I can see that slipping in. Other ones I have that could knock that out. I've got Cashing Out, which is basically about the AIDS crisis and how men with AIDS were selling their life insurance policies to get the cash because they knew they didn't have much time left. So just exploring just the difficulties of that time and kind of like the scam universe that involved as well. So I thought that sounded interesting. That might be just, personal queer bias on my end, but seems like one that can make it in. And then I've also got Classroom 4 as an option here. This one looked really interesting. It is basically about a professor teaching a class on like criminal law, and half of the class are like free students and half the class are incarcerated students. So that sounds like a very just interesting human study and like sociology topic that could be very fascinating. I can't remember the name of it, but there was a documentary short last year that focused on somebody who was on death row. I'm blanking on what it was called. But so like something within the judicial system like that seems like something that this group could go with. But those are the 5 I'm going with for now. So we've got All the Empty Rooms, We Were the Scenery, Armed Only with a Camera, The Life and Death of Brent Renaud, The Devil is Busy, and All the Walls Came. Okay, finally rounding out the shorts categories, we've got live action short. So at number 1 on my list, I've got Rock, Paper, Scissors. So this one's got 2,200 views and a 4.0 rating. Not the most views, it's actually the 3rd most viewed on all of this list of all of those that were shortlisted. It is the highest rated. It's the only one with a 4.0 or higher. And the thing with this one is that I'm really confident about is that it touches on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. It's about a father and son who sort of set up makeshift hospitals for those getting injured as Russia's invading Ukraine. Again, with that topical theme to it, I think that that's going to pull in a lot of votes from those who are voting within this category. Another thing with the shorts sometimes, and I didn't touch on this much in animated or documentary because there weren't many this year in those categories, but sometimes the title can really impact like your likeliness to get voted in these. I think about like animated short the past couple years where 2 years ago we had My Life of Dix and like last year we had Yuck. And like, so when you have a catchy title that can sometimes grab attention enough, either where someone's watching it and then like is like, oh, that's cool, I'll vote for it. Or like maybe they don't even watch it and they just vote for it because they think it has a cool name. So again, though, like I think Rock, Paper, Scissors has the credibility, like in terms of its quality and what it's speaking on to get nominated, but again, has a catchy title to it as well. So I think that just gives it the whole perfect picture to definitely get in there. Next up, for similar reasons, I've got Two People Exchanging Saliva. So again, on the title aspect, this one is about a dystopian world where kissing somebody is punishable by death. Feels topical in the world of, queerness being eradicated in certain parts of the world. Sensitive subject in America right now, especially with like transness and queer rights in general. 3,900 views, 3.9 rating. This is the most viewed of all of the shortlisted live action shorts. So I feel very confident about that one as well. And then the rest are a little bit of a toss up for me. I had to dive a little bit and look at, what these films are about, what might be tied to them that gives them an edge. Sometimes if a big name is tied to one of these, whether like they're a producer or did the music, or like if it's a live action and they're starring in it, that can have some impact. So with that said, I've got A Friend of Dorothy on here, which 1,500 views, 3.7 rating, like pretty good in the span of this list of 15. It stars Miriam Margolyes, so I took that enough as like, okay, she's like the most famous person in any of these short films, so I think the name recognition enough and like the face recognition enough might be enough to get this one in. It's also seems like a cute story. Again, catchy title, like A Friend of Dorothy. Hello. Seems fun. Excited to see that one, actually. It looks really cute. Then next, I've got Jane Austen's period drama, which is a double entendre because this is about like a couple where they're about to get married and the woman gets her period, but the husband thinks she's injured because he doesn't know what a period is. Seems very funny, silly, like again, uh, very clever double entendre title. Same thing as A Friend of Dorothy, 1,500 views, 3.7 rating. So I feel pretty good about that one as well. And then my fifth one, I've got The Pearl Comb. I had this one like crossed off as a definite no before because it only has 900 some views according to Letterboxd and then a 3.5 rating. And there are a couple that have higher rating or a lot more views, but looking at a Google search of this one, this one's getting a lot of attention because of the fact that it's like basically a horror short. It's about the like woman who it's supposed to be about a woman who's married to a fisherman that like essentially cures tuberculosis. Seems really interesting. I just read like a whole article about like how the creator of this film like really genre bends the shit out of it and like exploits the horror in a way that like really works. And apparently the opening really grabs you. So like if it's got a really good opening, then that's great because sometimes maybe some of these voters are only going to turn on the first couple minutes of these, and if they're not intrigued within those first couple minutes, they're going to move on. So I feel good about that. Other ones on here that I'm looking at as potential spoilers: Amarella. That one's got a lot of views. It's the second most viewed with 3.5 rating. I just didn't really see anything about this that like grabbed my attention too much, or like that I saw that other people are really gravitating towards it. And then also similarly with The Boy with White Skin. Uh, Again, a pretty highly viewed one, decently rated one. An interesting one on here. So I don't know if it's pronounced Ado or Ado. But this one stars Jennifer Lewis. I feel like I need to go watch this one because I do love Jennifer Lewis. But it's very sad because it's about a school shooting. So maybe I should be considering this one, but it's only got like 570 views and a 3.2 rating. That to me, the topicalness and the Jennifer Lewis of it doesn't stand out enough that I think I could get in. Who knows? Maybe the face and name recognition is enough. But again, I'm kind of already giving that to Miriam Margolyes in a film that seems to be getting better attention. So my five, I've got Rock, Paper, Scissors, Two People Exchanging Saliva, A Friend of Dorothy, Jane Austen's period drama, and The Pearl Comb. Okay, moving on to the last category that I don't feel very confident in, that being Best Documentary Feature. The big reason for that being that I have not seen any of these documentaries yet. I certainly will once the nominees come out, but I just have not had time yet to dive into any of these. However, what am I looking at as I'm thinking about my predictions here for Best Documentary? So obviously we have a short list of 15 that we get to pick from, so that helps. Cursors that could be valid guiding points here. We have the National Board of Review, which awards a documentary, and that often correlates to a recognition nomination for Best Documentary. We have the BAFTA long lists, which are very helpful because it helps put in perspective what folks around the world are thinking are good documentaries, and like that can be very indicative of where the documentary branch of the Oscars might be leaning. The documentary branch is often considered the most snooty of all the branch groups, mostly because, they really only nominate documentary films that have a very strong and poignant, like, global statement and have, like, an edge of some sort of, like, danger to them. So very rarely, if ever, do you see like a celebrity biopic documentary. You look back like at what often happens a lot is there is a favorite that emerges during the regional critics awards that ends up going nowhere in terms of the Oscars with documentaries. So like I think about the Christopher Reeves documentary, the Michael J. Fox documentary, Will and Harper last year, things that like center around already famous people, like they're not very interested in. They want something that's telling a important story that like impacts the cultural zeitgeist on a global scale. You even look at with Will and Harper last year, like I think a lot of people thought that because it's primarily centered around a trans story and like elevating trans rights in a time where, especially in like America, they're in danger, would have been important enough, but ultimately it wasn't. So that's something else to look at, is kind of like how serious of a documentary is it. And then we also have PGA, which does their own documentary branch nominations and awards as well. So with that being said, I have two on my certain list right now. The first being Cover Up. So Cover Up won the National Board of Review Award for Best Documentary. It is on the BAFTA long list, and it was also nominated for PGA. That is enough of like a precursor slate to me to feel comfortable with, on top of the fact that it's about an investigative journalist named Seymour Hersh, who is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who covered like two major, essentially war crimes that the US committed in two very different periods of time, one during the Vietnam War, one during the Iraq War. So I think that's poignant enough that the documentary branch is easily going to go for that. And then the second one I have on here is 2,000 Meters to Andrivka. Within the past like 3 years, ever since the conflicts with Ukraine and Russia have started, there's always been at least one film in documentary feature that has touched on that. And I think we have a couple here that like kind of fit the bill. But to me, 2,000 Meters to Andrivka like is the leader of the pack there and has the BAFTA long list, showed up a lot during critics groups, which I said like doesn't matter, but I think can matter when it fits the bill of like what the documentary branch is looking for. So those are the two I have as my safest right now, Cover Up and 2,000 Meters to Andrivka. And then I have three documentaries here on the bubble that round out my five right now. So I have Mr. Nobody Against Putin, Apocalypse in the Tropics, and The Perfect Neighbor. So looking at Mr. Nobody Against Putin, it might seem strange to have two documentaries within this group of five that sort of center around Russia in some way, but this one is so different in the fact that it follows a teacher like at a poor town school in Russia. And it's kind of split where like it focuses on kind of recording his students in the classroom, but then also focuses on some of the things that the Putin administration is putting into place. And how they're working to control the public perception as well. So I think that's so different from 2,000 Meters to Andrivka, where that's really in the throes of like the conflict itself. And this with Mr. Nobody Against Putin like takes it to a whole different perspective of like a different type of impact for a different type of people surrounded by a different lens. Apocalypse in the Tropics. So this has to do with the impacts of evangelical Christianity on the far right politics in Brazil. Honestly, I really picked this one because it feels like more and more that the Brazilian vote is becoming so potent within the Academy Awards, and that they are getting just very passionate about getting their films recognized wherever they can. You know, we saw that with I'm Still Here and Fernando Torres last year. We're seeing it happen this year a bit with the uprise of The Secret Agent. And so I don't see why. You know, there was also significant growth within South America specifically for representation within the Academy for folks that were invited this year. So that one is a bit of a gut feeling where I feel like that one could show up. And then The Perfect Neighbor, this is by far, you know, the favorite. This is what's winning all the critics awards. This is what everyone's talking about as it pertains to like documentary success this year. And I'm hesitant on it. You know, I think a lot of people probably have this at number one, but I think it's more at risk than a lot of people think. So, you know, The Perfect Neighbor focuses on a shooting that took place in Florida where a white woman shot her black neighbor. And it's very unique in the way that it utilizes like mostly body cam footage to tell the story. There's been a lot of recognition for the editing. Obviously, you know, it got the Critics' Choice nomination for editing, which was just a really cool nomination to see. But to me, I worry a little bit that this might be too American centric of a story to be embraced and recognized by an international documentary branch. So I do worry about it a little. Like, I have to say, I wouldn't be totally shocked if it ends up missing for something else. I actually had it out of my five, but I was like, you know what? I do think this has made enough of an impact that it will get the recognition that I think it deserves. And so I did end up putting it back on my list. Looking at some of the precursors, so like Mr. Nobody Against Putin, it's on the BAFTA long list, got the PGA nomination. Apocalypse in the Tropics, the BAFTA long list recognition, and then The Perfect Neighbor, like I said, like swept all of the critics awards this year. It's on the BAFTA long list, PGA nominated. So those are the five I'm predicting at the moment. The wild card I have here is My Undesirable Friends Part 1, Last Air in Moscow. So again, it's like really 3 documentaries centered around Russia. Again, this one is so different that it doesn't feel similar to 2,000 Meters or Mr. Nobody Against Putin in any way. This one focuses specifically on 2 independent Russian journalists who are trying to figure out, like, how they're going to do their job with the censorship coming in from the Putin administration. So again, just a completely different type of story with a completely different type of lens. Um, this one got some pretty high-end critics remarks. It did win Gotham, New York Film Critics, and LA Film Critics, which are some pretty prestigious documentary awards to get. So I would be on the lookout for this one to potentially upset any of the other 5 that I predicted. But for my predictions for Best Documentary Feature, I've got Cover Up, 2,000 Meters to Andrivka, Mr. Nobody Against Putin, Apocalypse in the Tropics, and The Perfect Neighbor. Next up, let's talk Best International Feature. So something to keep in mind with International Feature, um, the way that the submissions work is that they are submitted by country. And the country doesn't even necessarily have to be the country in which it was filmed or like the country in which it's about. It just has to do with like the country that decided to produce it, and then they're picking a film for submission. So sometimes there can be drama because there can be a great international pick. Like I'll use Anatomy of a Fall as example, where France did not pick Anatomy of a Fall as their choice for the French submission that year. There was some political drama there where they didn't want it representing the country. And so Anatomy of a Fall was not nominated for Best International Feature because it wasn't even submitted. So you get a submission per country, and then they get the short list by choosing 15 of those films from all those submissions. So this year, I think the talk everybody's going about right now is the fact that Neon may very well get 5 films in here because Neon went and bought all of their favorite movies at all of the festivals this year, and it may work out very well for them. So I am fairly confident in those 5 getting in, those being Sentimental Value from Norway, The Secret Agent from Brazil, It Was Just an Accident from France, Surat from Spain, and No Other Choice from South Korea. I have seen 4 out of 5 of these. The only one I haven't seen yet is Surat, but I don't see much of an upset happening here. You know, Sentimental Value is going to get the most nominations out of all these films. That's definitely in. The Secret Agent has just continued to grow in popularity. It won the Critics' Choice and Golden Globe Award for Best International Feature. It's got a Best Actor nomination coming, which we'll get to in a bit. So that's definitely getting in. It Was Just an Accident, the Palme d'Or winner, the critics' favorite throughout the year. The message behind it with what Jafar Panahi had to go through and is still going through for producing that film. I don't see that not making it in here. Surat, with how much of an upswing it had with the shortlist announcements and how many shortlists it made it on, and then No Other Choice being such like a heavy critic favorite and people calling it, you know, by far one of the best movies of the year, the best work that Park Chan-wook has ever put out. Yeah, so I feel really good about these 5 getting in. If there is an upset, I'd be devastated because I just saw it yesterday, 2 days ago, and I can't imagine it not getting in, but it would be No Other Choice. I do have that in 5th place right now as somewhat vulnerable. Um, it has missed some pretty significant marks across the board, you know, no other shortlist mentions for the Oscars. Park Chan-wook not really popping up anywhere for Best Director. It missing out pretty heavily on the BAFTA long list. Everywhere aside from International Feature. So if there were to be an upset, I would say The Voice of Hien Rajab from Tunisia would be the upset here. That being a very topical pick because it's a film where it uses real recordings from a Palestinian child calling 911, and then like that version of 911 and like other half being conjured into this story, like how the other end of the phone call went. And that has picked up a lot of buzz here and there. It has gotten nominations. And again, it's a very topical film for what's going on in the global atmosphere right now. So if there were to be an upset, I would say that would be it. But I'm pretty confident in these five, and I will be fairly surprised if any of them do not make it in. And then on to another category I'm feeling fairly certain on: Best Animated Feature. So my absolute certains that I have in are K-pop Demon Hunters, Zootopia 2, Arco, and Elio. At semi-safe, I have Little Amelie, or the character of Rain, with a wild card potential of Demon Slayer. So again, those top four, they're not missing. Like, K-pop Demon Hunters, the front runner winner right now. Zootopia 2, huge success at the box office, like definitely what this branch is going to go for as their like populist pick. Arco being the indie favorite, Elio being the other like kind of big studio favorite pick here, and then Little Amelie being another of the indie favorites on a global scale as well. Again, so these six are what were at the Golden Globes. I don't think Demon Slayer makes it in at the end of the day unless it has like a major passion upswing, but I don't see anything upsetting these five. So those are the five I'm predicting, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. Okay, time to dive into the technical categories, and we are going to kick it off with Best Visual Effects. So this is a fortunate one where we have a short list of 10. So we have a small list to pick from, but it's figuring out which five are the right five. So the 10 that were shortlisted, we've got Avatar Fire and Ash, The Electric State, F1, Frankenstein, Jurassic World Rebirth, The Lost Bus, Sinners, Superman, Tron Ares, and Wicked for Good. So two that I have as certain right now: Avatar Fire and Ash, probably winning. And then I've also got F1 in here. So what are we looking at as it pertains to where our confidence lies here? With a film like Avatar Fire and Ash, you don't even have to think about it. Like it's so obviously getting in. It's what that whole film franchise is built upon, and it's what everybody admires whenever a new Avatar movie is coming out. But aside from that, we do have the Visual Effects Society nominations that came out, I think, last week. So those are pretty fresh. Obviously, Avatar Fire and Ash was all over it. It was definitely the most nominated film of any within that group. F1 got the photoreal feature visual effects nomination. It's been showing up everywhere else. It's been picking up some wins here and there, especially with the critics. And the way F1 relies on like the combination of like editing, sound, visual effects, cinematography, like that whole realm of technical achievement, and the fact that it's a strong enough film where, it made it into PGA, it's showing up at a lot of the other guilds. That one's very, very, you can lean on with a lot of confidence that one's going to make it in. Both of those also making it into the BAFTA long list. That's something else we can look at in terms of precursors. So those are my two that I have as certains right now on the bubble. So the three I have that I'm rounding up my five with are The Lost Bus, Jurassic World Rebirth, and Sinners. So with The Lost Bus, this is a movie that early on in the season had some buzz, like for picking up a good amount of nominations, but it's a film that just got forgotten overall. But I think it's enough of a highbrow film with like a highbrow aesthetic in terms of visual effects that this branch is going to go for it. And again, it has that photoreal feature visual effects nomination with the Visual Effects Society. It's got the BAFTA long list, so I'm feeling pretty good about that one. Jurassic World Rebirth, same thing, and I think it's a franchise that again like relies on the visual effects for its success, and it's a beloved enough franchise that I think the branch will go for it. And then Sinners. So Sinners I've got on fifth here, and I think it could definitely get spoiled. So it showed up for Visual Effects Society on the supporting visual effects side. So there's the main visual effects five that get nominated for Visual Effects Society, and then there's the supporting visual effects. So, you have to think about it like, are the visual effects like the main driving force and like the main thing that you're seeing on screen? Or are you seeing, a film primarily being projected like with what's shot with just some supporting visual effects items being added in? And what Sinners is trying to sell and is trying to market is the fact of all of the body doubling and the insertion of Michael B. Jordan's face onto other bodies, like in the way that he portrayed the two different characters of Smoke and Stack. So they're really gunning for it. It did not make it onto the BAFTA long list, which is why I have it at number 5 here. Because I do think some folks are going to struggle with the fact of it's not flashy enough visual effects for them. And sometimes it's a scenario where like the most gets the recognition and the nomination. And I would say Sinners has like a clever and unique sense of visual effects, but not necessarily the most. So that's why I've got it at number 5. And with the potential spoilers of either Frankenstein or Wicked for Good. So Frankenstein was not mentioned in any of the main nominations for the Visual Effects Society. However, it did make it onto the BAFTA long list. And with how much of a craft favorite Frankenstein is going to be on nominations morning, I could see them picking this up as well. However, I'm leaning more towards the strength of Sinners overall as a film on Oscar nomination morning and how much it covers all of the branches, including pretty much every single technical category, and that at the end of the day, the visual effects branch will go for it. I've also got Wicked for Good as a potential spoiler. I had it in my 5 for a while, but Wicked for Good is just depleting so quickly in popularity that I do think that this is a spot where it is going to lose out, on a nomination it had for Part 1 last year. It didn't get any main recognition for Visual Effects Society. It got 1 nomination, and it kind of cracked me up because the way the Wicked for Good Instagram page shared it was like, VES nomination, Bison. And when you go look at the Visual Effects Society nominations, they have a ton of categories, and they'll like call out specific like creatures or elements, and like those specific things can get their own nomination. And so the bison that you see at the very beginning of Wicked for Good pulling the cart with the yellow bricks got its own nomination. So yay bison, but I don't think Wicked for Good's going to be making it in here. So my final 5 predictions for best visual effects are Avatar Fire and Ash, F1, The Lost Bus, Jurassic World Rebirth, and Sinners. Moving on, let's go into best sound. So another one where we have a short list of 10, those films being Avatar Fire and Ash, F1, Frankenstein, Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, One Battle After Another, Sinners, The Rot, Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere, Superman, and Wicked for Good. So I've got 3 that I'm certain on right now, those being F1, Sinners, and One Battle After Another. F1 at number 1 because I think it's a strong contender to win this category. Again, like I talked about with visual effects, it's those certain production values that make this movie what it is and, make it such an energetic viewing experience. I enjoyed F1 for that fact, and I think something else to consider with sound, so up until the Oscars that aired in 2020 for the 2019 films, sound used to be broken up into best sound mixing and best sound editing. Then from 2020 onward, they've combined the categories to just one best sound category. And more often than not, you see the films that are heavy on the sound editing side getting recognized here over the ones in the sound mixing side. Sometimes they switch it up. Sometimes they're really cool in this category. But I'm looking at the films that are popular this year and might be heavier on the sound editing side. So that's why, again, I think like F1 is the leader of the pack here. And then I've got Sinners and One Battle, just sort of solely based on the strengths of the films alone. I think Sinners is a strong number 2 with how much music is incorporated into that film and how much of a strong element like the music is throughout the entire film. And then with One Battle, I do think it's got some good sound mixing and sound editing with it being an action film that it's easily in there. So I feel really confident on those 3. When we look at the precursors to help us figure out how to round this out, so we do have the Motion Picture Sound Editors Awards, which we do have the nominations for. And then we also have the Cinema Audio Society Awards, which we do not have nominations for yet. We are actually getting those tomorrow. So I may change my mind on some of this after those come out tomorrow. But I'm currently basing it on what we have from those Motion Picture Sound Editor nominations, and then also the BAFTA long list. Obviously, F1, Sinners, and One Battle showing up heavily on all of those. Sinners actually, so motion picture sound editors has three categories. They have sound editing dialogue, sound editing effects, and music editing feature. Sinners showed up in all three of those categories. F1 showed up in both sound editing dialogue and effects, and then One Battle showing up in all three as well with sound editing dialogue, effects, and music editing. All three of those films are on the BAFTA long list. So then at number 4, as like a semi-safe, I've got Frankenstein. Um, it's on the BAFTA long list. It's got the sound editing dialogue and sound editing effects with motion picture sound editors. It, again, being such a craft heavy film, I don't see it having too hard of a time getting in here. And then number 5 is where I struggle a little bit. So on the bubble at number 5, I have Wicked for Good and Seurat. So with Wicked for Good, it's on the BAFTA long list. But in terms of the motion picture sound editors, it only made that music editing feature, so it didn't get any of the sound editing, even though I think it could have, because there is a good amount of like sound editing effects and ways in which it could have gotten to like potentially sound editing dialogue as well. I think it got into at least one of those last year for part 1. It is on the BAFTA long list, but again, kind of like I said with visual effects, I think this is a vulnerable category that Wicked Part 1 might have like squeaked in at like 3, 4, or 5 last year and has a strong potential to fall out this year. I am keeping it at my number 5 this year, just for the fact that it is a musical. Sinners is another musical. I'm almost talking myself out of it. I'm going to keep it for now. But also on the bubble, I do have Seurat. Solely based on the fact of it being a very cool passion pick within the sound branch. I don't have too much else to work on with it. We do have the European Film Awards where Seurat sort of swept all of the tech categories, including sound. So it has a somewhat significant sound win there, but like it got cinematography, editing, production design, sound. So I think if Seurat has a very strong morning and if they want to make a really cool pick, I think that could end up upsetting something like Wicked for Good. A potential spoiler, I don't have Avatar Fire and Ash in my 5. I don't think it's on the bubble. I think though, like if they want to pair it with visual effects, I think it could get in there. It did get the sound long list at BAFTA, but it did not show up anywhere within the motion picture sound editors group whatsoever. So theoretically, factually, Wicked for Good is actually ahead of Fire and Ash in that regard. So again, I've got 4 that I feel really good about, a 5th that I'm not so sure, but for right now, again, maybe until after the Cinema Audio Society nominations come out tomorrow, I'm going with F1, Sinners, One Battle After Another, Frankenstein, and Wicked for Good as my nominees for Best Sound. All right, Best Original Song. So this one's going to be interesting to see how it rounds out. Now, as my certains, I've got Golden from K-Pop Demon Hunters, I Lied to You from Sinners, and Dear Me from Diane Warren Relentless. Golden, obviously, likely winning. I Lied to You from Sinners, biggest song of one of the biggest movies and a potential upset to Golden. And then Dear Me, Diane Warren. If Diane Warren's eligible, you have to give her a slot. You just can't not count her. Is there a day where she misses? Sure, but I don't think where the song's from a documentary about herself that she's gonna be missing. So those 3 I've got locked in. On the bubble, I've got The Girl in the Bubble from Wicked for Good, and Last Time I Seen the Sun from Sinners. The Girl in the Bubble getting in relies heavily on Ariana Grande getting in for supporting actress, which I am predicting at this point in time. And I do think Stephen Schwartz is enough of a respected composer and that song stood out enough in Wicked for Good that it still makes it in. Again, kind of hint like if Ariana Grande misses, I'm like, oh no, song's not getting in. And I think supporting actress is probably going to be announced before Best Original Song is. And then I am predicting the double nomination for Sinners here. We haven't really seen it happen yet at any of the awards groups, and it's hard too because BAFTA doesn't have an award for Best Original Song. So really like we're looking at the Globes and we're looking at some of the music awards like the HMMAs and the Society of Composers and Lyricists. there's a lot there because Society of Composers and Lyricists does 6 songs for drama or documentary, and then 6 songs for comedy or musical, so that's 12. And then HMMA does, what did they have this year? 7. And HMMAs were a while ago. They were one of the first nomination groups to come out, like, for any award this year. We have a short list of 15. I'm not going to list all of them. But overall, I am predicting Sinners to miss out in a couple spots, but I think this is a spot where the film of the year, one of the films of the year, where music is the most important element in the film, I just see getting 2 songs in. Like, that just makes sense to me, honestly. Um, and I don't know if any of these other movies with songs eligible are strong enough to overtake it at this point. The spoilers I have right now are Drive from F1 with the Ed Sheeran tag to it, and then I've got Train Dreams from Train Dreams as another potential spoiler. I do have F1 higher because I just think F1 is a stronger film. It does have the Ed Sheeran name tied to it, so you never know. And then Train Dreams, I think a lot of people have in right now, but I'm not predicting Train Dreams to have the best day on nomination morning, so that's why I don't have it in. Also, I think there's a Sarah Bareilles song in here. Which one is it? Yeah, Salt Then Sour Then Sweet from Come See Me in the Good Light. Hey, if Sarah Bareilles got a surprise Oscar nomination on Thursday morning, I'd be thrilled for her. But for right now, I am predicting Golden from K-Pop Demon Hunters, I Lied to You from Sinners, Dear Me from Diane Warren Relentless, The Girl in the Bubble from Wicked for Good, and Last Time I Seen the Sun from Sinners. From Best Original Song, we move into Best Original Score. So we've got a short list of 20 that I am not going to read out. But here we go. So the 2 I have as certain locks. We've got Sinners, Ludwig Göransson, and we've got One Battle After Another, Johnny Greenwood. The 2 strongest films of the year. Sinners is winning this award, so it's definitely getting nominated. And then I think One Battle After Another is a very close second with this score. From there, so a little bit of a potential shakeup. So I've got 2 listed as semi-safe here. I have Alexandre Desplat's score for Frankenstein. Desplat is an 11-time nominee, 2-time winner. And again, with Frankenstein being like a top 6 film this year, very heavy on the crafts categories. This score has pretty much shown up everywhere. And with a composer that this branch clearly loves, I don't see it having an issue getting in. And then at number 4, I currently have Max Richter's score for Hamnet. Could see that being vulnerable, but again, it hasn't really missed either unless it was deemed ineligible somewhere. But again, with the strength of Hamnet as well, and the fact that, like, everyone's emotional tie to this movie relies so heavily on the score, I do think it's somewhat safe still getting in. So I've got a number 4. Then for number 5, I've got 2 on the bubble here. So I've got Jerskin Fendrix's score for Begonia and Daniel Lopatin's score for Marty Supreme. I don't know which one gets in at this point, honestly. I want to say Marty Supreme. Like, that score that Daniel Lopatin put together is so demented and like should not work given that it's like an 80s vibe in a 50s film, but it makes the movie, like, it elevates it so much more than it's already, like, the point it's already at. It's so good. But my fear is that it's too weird for the music branch at the Academy Awards. Like, we saw that they couldn't handle nominating Challengers. Granted, Challengers was not nearly as strong as a film as Marty Supreme is. But I do think that the Oscars struggle with techno music in this way sometimes. And I think Begonia is just continuing to grow in strength. It's on the BAFTA long list. It got the recognition at both HMMA and the Society of Composers and Lyricists, where Marty Supreme missed out on Society of Composers and Lyricists, even though it did make it into HMMA. That was significant enough for me to say that I think Begonia does have the slight edge here. The composer for that, Jerskin Fendrix, is a previous nominee for Poor Things, so he's got some name recognition within that branch within recent years. So that's where I've got it right now. Potential spoilers here. So F1, Hans Zimmer, an Academy favorite, 12 nominations and 2 wins. Um, my biggest thing there about that not being very safe for me is the fact that it did not get longlisted for BAFTA. I think that's pretty significant. I did really enjoy that score, honestly. Like, I know before I saw the movie, a lot of people were kind of griping on the fact that that score was showing up at a lot of places, but I really liked it. But I don't see it getting in. And then the other potential spoiler I have is Wicked for Good. Stephen Schwartz again. It got in for part 1 last year. It's a big swooping score. Like, it's probably the most classical of the scores, like, eligible this year. And so if they're really going for that vibe, it could pop up again. But I do think Wicked for Good is so weak that, like, it doesn't stand a very strong chance here. So I'm going with, for best original score, Ludwig Göransson for Sinners, Johnny Greenwood for One Battle After Another, Alexandre Desplat for Frankenstein, Max Richter for Hamnet, and Jerskin Fendrix for Begonia. Next up, best production design. So the 3 I've got absolutely locked right now are Frankenstein, Wicked for Good, and Sinners. Frankenstein being the front runner right now, Critics' Choice winner, critics' favorite, like sweeping all the regional critics awards, and definitely the one that's going to upset last year's winner, Wicked Part 1. I feel very good about Wicked for Good staying at number 2 this year, with it winning last year. And I think the production design quality being so strong, I don't think it has any issue picking up this nomination again. Nathan Crowley, 7-time previous nominee, obviously a 1-time winner for Wicked Part 1 last year. And then Sinners, the strength of the film, it's a gorgeous period production design. Hannah Beachler, previous winner for Black Panther. Those 3 I'm incredibly confident on getting in on Thursday morning. The other 2, so from a semi-safe perspective, I've got Hamnet. With precursors, things that we look at, we've got the BAFTA long list, we've got the Set Decorator Society, and we've got the Art Directors Guild. So I have Hamnet because it popped up in both of those places, in the period category for Set Decorator Society and the period category for Art Directors Guild. It's on the BAFTA long list. The production design branch does tend to lean towards like period pieces that are very pretty and gorgeous to look at. And I do think the production design plays such a significant role within Hamnet that I feel pretty good about it getting in here. And so that rounds out 4. And then for my 5, I'm stuck between One Battle After Another and Marty Supreme. So with the 4 I have already picked out, we don't have a contemporary production design in here. And sometimes you do see one get in. It can be hard, but I think One Battle After Another is a strong enough film that it will pick this one up. It's got Florencia Martin, who did the production design for Babylon, with One Battle absolutely getting double-digit nominations on Thursday morning. I can see it picking this one up. I think there are some elaborate showcase pieces that work well for it, like everything within the apartment building when Pat and Sensei are going through there in the store, and like I just think there's such a wide variety of like different production design within that movie that it's not going to be pigeonholed as like just a contemporary type of film and production design. Showed up at Set Decorator Society, showed up at Art Directors Guild. It's in the BAFTA long list. So I am leaning on One Battle being that 5th slot for me right now. I think Marty Supreme is right behind it. Again, a very beautiful period production design. Very crowded, very New York, like adds to the anxiety of that film overall. It's got Jack Fisk doing the production design, who did There Will Be Blood, The Revenant, Killers of the Flower Moon, so somebody that this branch has recognized a few times before. Marty Supreme, it's in the BAFTA long list. It got the period category nomination for Art Directors Guild, and it got the period nomination for Set Decorator Society, so I do think it's right there. And then a couple wild cards I do have here as well. I have Begonia. I think, again, for a contemporary production design, it's very impressive. It's got the same precursor recognition as these others after the 2 guilds. And then it's also got James Price behind it, who just recently won Best Production Design for Poor Things, another collaboration with Yorgos Lanthimos. And then I also have the Fantastic Four First Steps in here as a potential wild card. This one, This is the only place that this movie has been popping up. It got the Critics' Choice nomination. It is on the BAFTA long list, and it did show up in the sci-fi fantasy category for set decorators and in the fantasy category for Art Directors Guild. So it is a little tough, honestly. Like, those top three, I think, are locked. Frankenstein, Wicked, Sinners. Hamnet could be vulnerable. And then, I think One Battle, Marty Supreme, and Begonia are kind of duking it out, and then Fantastic Four could also swoop in. But right now, my final predictions for Best Production Design are going to be Frankenstein, Wicked for Good, Sinners, Hamnet, and One Battle After Another. All right, makeup and hair. So this is one where we have a short list of 10 from the Academy. So those being The Alto Knights, Frankenstein, Kakuo, Marty Supreme, Nuremberg, One Battle After Another, Sinners, The Smashing Machine, The Ugly Stepsister, and Wicked for Good. So I've got 4 here that I'm pretty locked in on. I've got Frankenstein, Wicked for Good, One Battle After Another, and Sinners. Frankenstein being the front runner, Wicked for Good elevating the craft here in comparison to part 1, I would say, with the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, the aging elements. I think they focused a lot on the marketing of the makeup special effects here. Precursors that we have to look at. We've got BAFTA long list, and we also have Mua. I wonder if they go Mua when they pronounce that. So stupid. It's getting late. Anyway, so Mua, Makeup Artist and Hairstylist Guild. Frankenstein showing up in period character makeup, special makeup effects, and period character hairstyling. Wicked for Good showing up the same 3: period character makeup, special makeup effects, and period character hairstyling. So feeling great about those 2. One Battle After Another showing up in contemporary makeup, special makeup effects, and contemporary hairstyling. That's a great trio to have for a contemporary film like that. And I think they're also selling on the fact of the prosthetics they use on Sean Penn towards the end of the film after the car explosion. And then with Sinners, similar situation with Mua showing up in special makeup effects and peer-to-character hairstyling and period character makeup. And so again, like with One Battle and Sinners being such strong films, I think they're fine here as well, given that like maybe in another year with like stronger makeup and hair contenders, they might not make the list, but in this year I think they're good. So what is number 5? On the bubble right now, I'm between Marty Supreme and The Smashing Machine. I am ultimately going with Marty Supreme. It made the short list for BAFTA. It got only the period and character hairstyling at Mua. It did not get any of the makeup ones. However, I think the production team for Marty Supreme is really trying to sell the fact of, like the acne scars that they did on Timothée Chalamet's face. And I feel like they're low-key gonna like try and sell the fake black eye as like a unique makeup choice, because you can like kind of tell that it was fake, but it had to look real enough for Marty to believe it. So I think The Smashing Machine would make more sense. It got period character makeup, it got the BAFTA long list, but I think that film is just so weak. Like if Dwayne The Rock Johnson were coming along for an acting nomination, maybe. But I don't see any passion for that film even to nominate it here. So it feels weird going for such big picture contenders here, but my 5 for best makeup and hair are going to be Frankenstein, Wicked for Good, One Battle After Another, Sinners, and Marty Supreme. Moving on to best costume design. So the 3 I have locked right now are actually the same as best production design. I've got Frankenstein, Wicked for Good, and Sinners. Again, Frankenstein kind of becoming the runaway front runner with this one. Wicked for Good, Paul Tazwell, winner last year for Wicked Part 1, previous nominee for West Side Story. Such an elevation in the evolution of the costumes between Wicked Part 1 and Wicked for Good that I think it's very safe. And then Sinners, we've got Ruthie Carter, previous nominee for Malcolm X and Amistad, and then previous winner for both Black Panther and Black Panther Wakanda. So those 3 locked in, feeling good about it. And then the next 2 to round on my 5, I've got a semi-safe. I have Hamnet and I have One Battle After Another. Hamnet, with I'm sorry, I'm probably gonna mispronounce this, but Malgosia Terzanska. One more time, Malgosia Terzanska. Um, Never nominated before, but Hamnet, again, similar to production design being such a strong period piece, and the costume branch tending to pick up like a period costume film where it's able to. And I think Hamnet is the strongest contender to be able to do so. And then One Battle After Another, I have in fifth. Again, strength of the film, but also it's got Colleen Atwood, previous nominee 12 times, 4 wins, definitely a strong enough name within the costume branch to come along with this one in a film that is also so strong. Um, all 5 of these movies are within the BAFTA 10 long list, and we also have the costume guilds that we can look at, um, in which, one Battle After Another's in contemporary, Frankenstein and Hamnet and Sinners are in period, and then Wicked for Good in sci-fi fantasy. Potential spoilers, Begonia, I have like right there as a potential, and I think mostly like for the finale. The alien costumes are like really gorgeous and ornate and such a like contrast to what the rest of the movie looks like that I could see it sneaking in there. But even though I have Begonia having a pretty good Oscar nomination morning, I don't have it doing quite so well that it's going to reach it there with this costume design nomination. I've also got Marty Supreme in there as a potential spoiler, for a different type of period costuming, with it being the 50s. Miyako Belize, never nominated before, but that costume design is on the BAFTA long list, and it did not make it on the Costume Guild. So that's why I'm not too confident on it being a potential spoiler there, but you never know if Marty Supreme has a really good morning. Then I also have Downton Abbey, the grand finale, on here. Seems silly just because like that film has had no buzz within the award circuit whatsoever, but like it's there at the Costume Guild, nominated for period costumes. It's in the BAFTA long list 10, but I think that's just British bias, honestly. But if there were to be like a jaw dropper shock here, I wouldn't be surprised if that was it. But, and I think I have it matching my production design 5. For best costumes, I'm predicting Frankenstein, Wicked for Good, Sinners, Hamnet, and One Battle After Another. All right, slowly making our way to the above the line categories. We're going into best cinematography. So the 3 films I have locked for this one, I've got Sinners, One Battle After Another, and Frankenstein. So I think Sinners is going to end up winning this at the end of the day. I just want to call out, so Autumn Durald Arkapaw would be the first woman to ever win Best Cinematography at the Oscars, so that's pretty dope. Just want to call that out. But it's also cool because Sinners in One Battle, both Autumn and then Michael Bauman for One Battle, have never been nominated at the Oscars for Best Cinematography before, and they're like by far the front runners right now, so that's pretty cool. Just want to call that out. And then with Frankenstein, again, as I've said many times, Craft Dominator, Dan Lawson, Shape of Water, and Nightmare Alley cinematographer, definitely recognized by this branch before, and I don't think has any hard time getting in here. On the semi-safe side, I've got Marty Supreme, Darius Kanji, who was previously nominated for Evita and Bardo. And then I've got 3 on the bubble. So let's talk precursors a little bit. So obviously we have the BAFTA long list, and then we have the BSC and the ASC, which are the British Society of Cinematographers and the American Society of Cinematographers. So these 4 that I mentioned in the top are all on the BAFTA long list, and then they all were nominated for both BSC and ASC. So that's Sinners, One Battle, Frankenstein, and Marty Supreme. So pretty confident in those. I could see Marty Supreme like missing if it has a weirdly bad morning on nomination morning, but I'm still feeling pretty good about it. And so it's number 5 that is a bit of a toss up right now. And I have 3 films on the bubble right now. Those being Train Dreams, Hamnet, and F1. So Train Dreams has the advantage of being the critics' favorite all year. It did get the ASC nomination, but it did not get the BSC nomination. Cinematographer is Adolfo Veloso, who has never been nominated before, so would be a new face. Hamnet, we've got Lucas Zal, who's previously nominated for both Ida and Cold War, and also did The Zone of Interest. which was not nominated and should have been. But so he's got some Academy recognition prior, and if Hamnet has a really good morning, that could sweep in and kind of be like the fifth place upset here. And then with F1, we've got Claudio Miranda, who did Benjamin Button and Life of Pi, winning for Life of Pi. And F1 has popped up a lot as like a critic's fave for some, and a couple nominations here and there for the cinematography. And again, like tied into the whole editing, sound, visual effects, like cinematography kind of fits right in that bill as well. Um, so I'm very, very torn between those three. Potential wild cards. We've got Surratt. So I think if Surratt has a crazy morning on Thursday, it could sneak in here. It did win the EFA, the European Film Award. Begonia, Robbie Ryan, who worked with Yorgos on both The Favorite and Poor Things, known for his very funky cinematography style, but I think it's very toned down just for the style in which Begonia is done, that it doesn't really stand out as much as his work in those other two films did. So I don't really see it necessarily getting in here. And then we got Die My Love. Seamus McGarvey, who did Atonement and Anna Karenina, and is the other nominee for the BSC. So it's Train Dreams and Die My Love that kind of split between the American and the British Cinematographers Society. So a little bit tricky on figuring out who that number 5 is. Begonia, Die My Love, F1, Hamnet, Train Dreams, all on the BAFTA long list. Surratt is not, but basically all 4, 7, 10 that I have here are on that list. The only one I don't have from the BAFTA long list is Ballad of a Small Player, but that's definitely because that's just a British fave film. So I am going to go with F1 here. That's what I'm locking in. I originally had Train Dreams, but I don't. No, you know what? I'm going to go for Train Dreams. We see it sometimes where the ASC is usually a pretty good indicator. Like they often get 4, if not 5 in every year. And it's not uncommon for a film's only nomination to be in cinematography if it's impressive enough. Like you look at oh my gosh, I can't even remember the name of it. That's how forgetful that film was. The Maria Callas film that Angelina Jolie did last year. Was it just called Maria? I think it was. But that got into just cinematography after getting the ASC nomination. So yeah, I think Train Dreams could do that even if it doesn't get anything else. I do think it will get this one. So my final predictions for best cinematography are Sinners, One Battle After Another, Frankenstein, Marty Supreme, and Train Dreams. Rolling into best editing, so the 4 films I have as absolute locks here, I've got One Battle After Another, Sinners, F1, and Marty Supreme. As I've said, One Battle and Sinners being the frontrunner juggernauts of the year, I don't think have any issue getting into best editing here. F1, the editing is the standout feature of that film. It's been a critic's favorite winner throughout the year, and I think the film is strong enough within the several crafts it's going to be nominated in that I think it easily gets in here, and it makes sense to have a Vroom Vroom movie in editing as well. And then Marty Supreme, strong enough film that heavily relies on its editing for its success, and it's just a very critical component of that movie. Now, for number 5, I have on the bubble Hamnet and Begonia. I'm leaning Hamnet right now, mostly because of the fact that we typically see like one subtle, like gentle film within best editing. And the 4 I already have in are very intense. And so we're kind of missing that like more intimate editing feel within this field. So that's why I'm leaning Hamnet right now. I think Begonia is kind of right there too. With Yorgos being a previous nominee for both The Favorite and Poor Things. I think could slip in here if Begonia has like a crazy good morning. But I, again, like similar to like production design, costumes, cinematography, I don't think Begonia is quite strong enough to break into some of these bigger like crafts categories. So I am going with Hamnet for now. Any potential spoilers, A House of Dynamite, just because like even though that film has really crashed and burned, there has been a consensus that like that is sort of the standout part of that film that is very good. Kirk Baxter's behind it, who did the editing for Benjamin Button, won for both The Social Network and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Um, and then potential wild cards, I've got Surratt and Weapons. Um, so in terms of precursors, we have the Ace Eddie Awards, but they are not the nominations are not out yet, so we can't look at those. We do have the BAFTA long lists, in which pretty much all these are in except for Surratt. I slipped Surratt in here as a wild card again if it has a crazy good morning, and it did win the EFA for editing last night. So, and then with Weapons, it's on the BAFTA long list. And I think if Weapons has a crazy good morning, could be a potential upset there as well. Um, but again, I'm looking for something that's softer to fill out this five. And I would have said sentimental value, but even though sentimental value is looking very strong, the fact that it missed the BAFTA long list is really concerning to me. So I just don't even have it in the realm of getting in here at the Oscars. So my final predictions for best editing are going to be One Battle After Another, Sinners, F1, Marty Supreme, and Hamnet. All right, let's talk writers, and we'll kick it off with best original screenplay. So the three films I have solidified here are Sinners, Marty Supreme, and Sentimental Value. I don't think they're going anywhere. I think they all have their own individual strengths as original screenplays, and we will definitely be hearing those films read off on Thursday morning. Now, somewhat safe at number 4, I do have It Was Just an Accident from Jafar Panahi. There was a point in time where I think a lot of people thought this was going to potentially upset Sinners as like the front runner for the year for best original screenplay, but it just hasn't proven to do so yet. But I do think It Was Just an Accident has really shown up where it's needed to. Like, it got the Golden Globe nomination. It is on the BAFTA long list. Precursor wise, an issue that we have, not an issue, but like, we have the Writers Guild, but those nominations are not out yet and will not be out till after nominations, so we can't use that to our advantage. But I think we can culminate a good top 4 here. And then so the question now is, what's number 5? And I have 3 that I think are on the bubble, those being Sorry Baby, Weapons, and The Secret Agent. I think Sorry Baby is going to take this 5th slot. Ava Victor. Let's fucking make it happen. Um, I think everything is falling in line at the perfect time for Ava Victor to get this nomination right now. Between the Best Director debut for DGA, Julia Roberts giving Ava Victor a very specific call out on the Golden Globe stage, televised, telling people to watch that movie. Ava Victor is really making the circuit on interviews right now, and I just think it's all coming together to create this passion vote for that nomination to happen. And is it a Hope Diction? Maybe, but I do truly believe that it can happen, and I think others do as well. And it's like really one of the best screenplays of the year, so it should be nominated. And it's not so uncommon to see at least one original screenplay get in that's like a sole nomination. And the writers really do go out of their way sometimes to make sure that like a good pick gets in. And so I do think there's a great chance that it'll happen. Weapons, I think, is its most stiff competition. I think Weapons has some more strengths like within the nomination board overall, and if it has a good morning on Thursday, then it could also get this screenplay nomination as well. Weapons does have the BAFTA long list mention where Sorry Baby does not, but again, I'm kind of just riding on vibes for this one and manifesting that the writers branch will pull through on this one. I do also have The Secret Agent circling there. You know, it made the BAFTA long list. It's continuing to grow in popularity. I just don't know if I see 3 international screenplays getting in here. It would be really cool, but I don't know if it's going to happen yet at this point in time. So my final predictions for Best Original Screenplay are Sinners, Marty Supreme, Sentimental Value, It Was Just an Accident, and Sorry Baby. And then Best Adapted Screenplay, which I think is a bit more of a toss-up than Best Original. The only 2 I see as like very certain here are One Battle After Another and Hamnet. Then next up at semi-safe, I have Begonia and Frankenstein. So One Battle, Hamnet, like they're getting in, no question, no need to discuss. Begonia and Frankenstein, so I think this is where Begonia shows up above the line. and proves like its best picture strength a little bit. And I do think the screenplay is strong enough that it will get in here. You know, it has the BAFTA long list mention for adapted screenplay in terms of precursors. We do have the USC Scripter Awards. However, they're really weird because like they determine so much stuff ineligible, so they're not that great to follow in terms of a precursor. And then Frankenstein again, BAFTA long list mention. Strength of the film overall. I think it could be vulnerable because I don't know if that the film is respected in that regard as like an above the line movie as much as it is as like a craft achievement movie. And so on the bubble, I have both Train Dreams and No Other Choice. Train Dreams, I think, being like the most likely to get in here. I've got it at my number 5 with No Other Choice right behind it. I would have really liked to see it get the BAFTA long list for me to put No Other Choice in this 5. But I do think Train Dreams may be a bit undeniable here with some of the popularity it's growing. So my final predictions for Best Adapted Screenplay are One Battle After Another, Hamnet, Begonia, Frankenstein, and Train Dreams. Okay, it is time for actors. So let's start with Best Supporting Actor. Pretty easy category. I've got 5 here that I'm very certain about, and I'd be very surprised if any of them missed. So I've got Stellan Skarsgård for Sentimental Value, Sean Penn for One Battle After Another, Benicio del Toro for One Battle After Another, Paul Mescal for Hamnet, and Jacob Elordi for Frankenstein. These 5 have been like solidified for a while. I know Adam Sandler was circling around for a little bit, but Jay Kelly is just so dead in the water that I don't see it happening. And like any upset here would be like a true wild card, and I think it's either like Delroy Lindo for Sinners or like Miles Caton for Sinners if Sinners has an absolutely insane morning. But I don't see that happening at this point, so I'm very comfortable with those 5, and those are the 5 I'm proceeding with. Now, supporting actress, on the other hand, is a whole different story. The only person I think is like 100% safe that I would put like a lot of money on is Teyana Taylor for One Battle After Another. I know some of y'all might be like, there's people that are safe. And I'm like, yeah, they're kind of safe, but like I think some crazy shit might happen in this category on Thursday, and we need to be prepared for that. But I've got 3 others as my like semi-safe, and that's Ariana Grande for Wicked for Good, Amy Madigan for Weapons, and Inga Ipsdotter Lilias for Sentimental Value. I feel pretty good about them. You know, Ariana and Amy have shown up at every precursor, you know, Critics' Choice, Globes, SAG Actor Award, BAFTA long list. Inga obviously missing SAG, but that's just because SAG decided they hated international movies this year, whatever. But I think her narrative is very strong as like the standout performance in Sentimental Value, and she also just gave a very good speech at her NBR awarding last week. So she's good enough to be in my semi-safe right now. However, we've got 4 other people circling this 5th spot. And I think one of them could also break in and say, yoink, you thought you were safe, not anymore. So those 4 I'm looking at are Odessa Zion for Marty Supreme, Wunmi Masaku for Sinners, Elle Fanning for Sentimental Value, and Gwyneth Paltrow for Marty Supreme. As my 5th, I'm currently going with Odessa Zion. I think everything with regards to Marty Supreme is happening at the correct time right now. I think as soon as, side tangent, if you don't know, there's like a conspiracy theory about the alphabetical bias of how the SAG Actor Award ballots work, and that since the first names are at the top, you just go through and check. Oh, a Zion at the very top, so of course you got in. You can look back and say like, okay, Jonathan Bailey, Jamie Lee Curtis, like, yes, there are examples where Pamela Anderson, so there are examples where that proves to be very true, and this could be a case. However, either way, that nomination for her spearheaded a campaign that A24 was ready to do for her. She's all over the place. A24 is putting her all over the place. Marty Supreme is continuing to grow, just crossed 100 million at the box office. Like, it's not going anywhere. And so I think it's the right timing for her to sweep in for this 5th and final slot. But again, you know, Wunmi Masaku has shown up where she is needed to, at Critics' Choice and SAG Actors, BAFTA long list, in a very strong movie. Elle Fanning, you know, Critics' Choice, Golden Globe, missed out on SAG. If anything, you would think maybe they would have gotten like the only American actress from that movie who is also playing an American actress in the movie into that 5. But I think that Neon is pushing the shit out of her and really like trying to showcase the fact of how difficult of a role she had to play in that movie. And then Gwyneth Paltrow just being the legend that she is, playing such a meta role in Marty Supreme as a returning actress after, decades off. It's crazy. This is going to be a wild category nomination, and like it's probably gonna be the first category that's read off on Thursday too, which is gonna just send me into a tailspin. But as of right now, I just don't think the Sinners performances individually are strong enough to push through for a nomination in the acting categories. I don't think both Sentimental Value girls get in without a major upset happening. And I don't think both Marty Supreme women get in. And I do think Odessa Zion is stronger. So my final prediction 5 for Best Supporting Actress are Teyana Taylor for One Battle After Another, Ariana Grande for Wicked for Good, Amy Madigan for Weapons, Inga Ipsdottir Lilias for Sentimental Value, and Odessa Zion for Marty Supreme. All right, Best Actor. I'm buckling up because this is where some crazy hot takes and predictions of mine are coming in. So my certains for getting a nomination are Timothy Chalamet for Marty Supreme, Leonardo DiCaprio for One Battle After Another, and Wagner Moura for The Secret Agent. At semi-safe, I've got Ethan Hawke for Blue Moon, so that's 4. And you might be thinking, Alex, there's a name you didn't say yet. That's correct. So on the bubble for this 5th slot, I currently am between Jesse Plemons for Begonia and Michael B. Jordan for Sinners. So I don't think Michael B. Jordan is nearly as safe for a nomination as everyone is perceiving it to be. I think this is similar to, not the same, but similar to a Barbie situation where Michael is likely number 4, number 5 on a lot of ballots, and I think will be beaten out by passion votes by these other folks. So like Timothy, Leo, Wagner Moura, they're locked. Timothy likely winning the Oscar. Wagner Moura coming along with an international film that's only getting stronger. Leo in the front runner film of the year. Those 3 are locked. Those 3 are all getting like a ton of number 1, number 2 votes. Ethan Hawke, Blue Moon, likely the only nominee from that movie, beloved actor, going to be getting a ton of number 1 votes from people to make sure that he gets into this 5. Jesse Plemons for Begonia, I think also is going to be getting a lot of passion votes at number 1, number 2 to help make sure that he gets in, because for a lot of people, he is like their favorite lead acting performance of the year. So at this moment, yes, I'm predicting that Michael B. Jordan does not make it in. I have him right there at number 6. Like, I think it's going to be really close. I will not be surprised if he gets in. I'll be thrilled if he gets in. But I'm looking at the past. I'm looking at what I think has been just the vibe of the year so far. If Michael would have like won something significant so far, like either Critics' Choice or the Best Actor Drama at the Globes, maybe, but, or not even maybe, I'd feel so much more comfortable putting him in here. But I think he's towing the line and that he's going to end up not making it in. Couple wild cards. I really do think it's just between those 6, honestly, like fighting for those 5 spots. But a couple crazy wild cards. I've got Joel Edgerton for Train Dreams, but I think that's just way too subtle of a performance to budge in here, and I don't think Train Dreams is going to perform that well. And then I've got Lee Byung-hun for No Other Choice. Just saw it Saturday, loved it, loved that performance. I wish he could get in here. I don't know who I would take out at this point. I would just be like, just take somebody, but put him in, please. Because he's so good. But no, I really think it's between those 6. And so my final predictions for Best Actor are Timothy Chalamet for Marty Supreme, Leonardo DiCaprio for One Battle After Another, Wagner Moura for The Secret Agent, Ethan Hawke for Blue Moon, and Jesse Plemons for Begonia. And Best Actress. So I think we have another situation here as well where we've got 6 people circling 5 spots, but in the certain to get nominated realm, I've got Jessie Buckley for Hamnet and Renata Reinsve for Sentimental Value. Jessie Buckley, being the front runner this year, pretty much has the Oscar engraved already. And Renata Reinsve, I think really is like a solid number 2. Like, I think she's going to get a lot of high votes. She just won the European Film Award. Similar trajectory for Sandra Hüller for Anatomy of a Fall. God dare I say it, but Carla Sofia Gascon for Emilia Perez. Like, it all just makes sense. Like, she's coming in. There's no way. I will be gobsmacked if Renate Reinsve does not make it into this 5. And then right there at like semi-safe, I've got Rose Byrne in 3rd for a 5 legs that kick you. I know I was trying to like anti-dict it for a while, not for any reason, but just like I don't think it's gonna happen. But after the Globes win, the SAG Actors Award nomination, the BAFTA long list mention, I'm like, okay, she's getting in, and it'll be a good nomination. I can't wait to see that movie next week when it comes out on HBO Max. And then I've got Emma Stone in 4th for Begonia. And then right now I have Chase Infinity in 5th on the bubble for One Battle After Another. But I think on the bubble there with her fighting for that other spot is Kate Hudson for Song Sung Blue. I am ultimately going with Chase Infinity for the fact that she hasn't missed anywhere yet, which doesn't mean she can't. You know, it could be the same thing as I said for Michael B. Jordan, where she's been kind of coattailing along the way and isn't really going to have like number 1 or number 2 votes that get her into this 5. But, you know, she's really driving a strong campaign for herself. She's everywhere. Her TikTok is like all over the place. And like, she's just such a good sport. Happy to be there. Everyone's happy to be around her. And I do think that will ultimately help her get in here. Kate Hudson with Song Sung Blue, just not a movie that anyone has gravitated towards, but I think does have an advantage where there will be a strong body of people putting her at number 1 at an attempt to put her in. And that could edge Chase Infinity out, but I don't think it's quite enough to do it. Wild cards here that I think are just very unlikely, but you know, who knows? Amanda Seyfried for The Testament of Anne Lee, but like, you know, after Anne Lee getting completely blanked on the BAFTA long list, I just don't see it happening. And now, well, voting's over, but now she's running this whole campaign about how like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like nobody cares if you win an Oscar. They care if you get nominated, but who remembers who won an Oscar in the past 10 years? We all do, Amanda. You haven't met the pundits, but we all do. Cynthia Erivo, Wicked for Good, you know, this breaks my heart because I think No Good Deed is one of the best scenes of the year, but no. The Critics' Choice miss, the SAG Actor Award miss. It's just not good. It's not happening for her, but she'll be slaying in Dracula, so it's okay. And then I put Ava Victor on here as a wild card because I'm like, you know, if everyone starts like really trying to ham her up to get her in, then maybe the actors will too. That'd be wild. I would like y'all would hear my scream from like San Francisco if Ava Victor's name got read off as a Best Actress nominee. But yeah, so ultimately though, my final predictions for Best Actress are Jessie Buckley for Hamnet, Renate Reinsve for Sentimental Value, Rose Byrne for 5 Legs That Kick You, Emma Stone for Begonia, and Chase Infinity for One Battle After Another. All right, folks, we're starting to come down the home stretch here. It's time to talk Best Director. So I do think that Best Director is a little bit of a toss-up bloodbath right now, more than I think some people are letting on to think. Right now, I think the only certain nomination is Paul Thomas Anderson for One Battle After Another. At number 2, number 3, semi-safe, I have Chloe Zhao for Hamnet and Joachim Trier for Sentimental Value. And then I've got 4 more circling the bubble for those remaining 2 spots. I've got Jafar Panahi for It Was Just an Accident, Josh Safdie for Marty Supreme, Ryan Coogler for Sinners, and Guillermo del Toro for Frankenstein. So right now, to round on my 5, I have Jafar Panahi for It Was Just an Accident and Josh Safdie for Marty Supreme, which means I do not have Ryan Coogler in for Sinners. And I know it's already fucking crazy enough that I didn't have Michael B. Jordan in for actor. This one I feel less confident on, but again, I'm kind of going on a gut instinct here. So what do we have so far to tell us where director's going? We've got DGA, right? But we can pretty much guarantee that the DGA 5 is not carrying to the Oscars because there were no international directors in DGA this year. You know, we had Paul, Chloe, Josh, and Guillermo. I mean, Guillermo, not American, but you know, like for an American film. Oh, we're not getting those 5 for the Oscar 5. There's no way. At least one has to come out. At least. And let me tell you, Joachim Trier for Sentimental Value is so safe. Like, I will eat my words so hard if he misses, but like, this is why we have to look at the European Film Awards and why they matter sometimes. Sentimental Value sweeping all the above the lines when it was already the frontrunner International Film of the Year matters. Joachim Trier winning Best Director at EFA matters. You know, he hasn't missed anywhere except for DGA, which you can write off as the fact that they didn't take any international films in there this year. but he's getting in. I think Chloe's very safe, like I said. And then it really is. And then I think Jafar Panahi is safe for It Was Just an Accident. It's like I said at the beginning, we have these individual branch groups that are voting for their respective categories. The director's branch, aside from the documentary branch, is probably the next most like snooty, most picky, really looking for a type of direction that like speaks to them that they really want to recognize. Jafar Panahi screams that, this is what I want to make sure people recognize if one of their favorites doesn't get nominated on Thursday morning in this category and Jafar Panahi gets in, is that this man is like literally facing jail time for creating It Was Just an Accident and like constantly going at it with the Iranian government, like facing prison sentencing for creating film essentially, and the fact that they had to get this produced in France to be able to distribute it. He's somebody like as a filmmaker who is like the pinnacle of what this award should be meant to be, when you look at the global scale of what it means to be a film director and what it means to like give up everything for your art, And so I want people to remember that if his name pops up and somebody else's doesn't, that it is such a big deal nomination. And so with that said, like that's why I think Jafar Panahi is so safe here. I think it all circles back to the Palme d'Or win, even though he hasn't popped up on a televised win anywhere, especially with fucking Judd Apatow's fucking embarrassing moment he was trying to have with the Golden Globes. Oh my God. Anyway, so those four, I think for this fifth spot, we are really between Josh Safdie and Ryan Coogler. And I think, again, Marty Supreme is having such a moment. Both of these guys are people who have imprinted themselves on American cinema in different ways. Josh Safdie from a very indie, risk-taking, like out of the box perspective in the types of films he's created, and then Ryan Coogler from a different type of like risk-taking perspective in the sense of like having these huge studios luring above him to deliver what ended up being like great successful hits for American cinema, right? So they're both newcomers in the sense of this awards conversation. They've both kind of honed their talents and crafts to their highest potential for these two specific movies. And at the end of the day, I think Marty Supreme right now is having the upswing with its release recently, with it still being a smash at the box office. I think it's fresher on people's minds and will end up just coming out on top over Ryan Coogler. It's going to be a crazy day if that happens. Like the discourse online is going to be absolutely insane, but we need to look at it and remember and say like, so then what do you take out if that happens, right? And like for any of them, like, if any of those five of those six get in, I can't look at any of them and say like, oh, well, I would take this one out for that one. Like between One Battle, Hamnet, Sentimental Value, It Was Just an Accident, Marty Supreme, Sinners, to me, no other choice as well. But like that's not happening. I have it as a crazy wild card right now, but I don't think it's happening. But of those six, I'm like, any of those five can get in and I'd be happy. And then I'll still be sad for whichever one gets left out. So that's just my prediction right now based on how I'm feeling, based on a gut instinct that I'm following. Hopefully I'm proven wrong. I don't know. But again, then like who gets taken out, right? Because it just sucks that we have like six such incredibly worthy contenders this year for this Best Director nomination, and they can't all get in. So my final predictions for Best Director are Paul Thomas Anderson for One Battle After Another, Chloe Zhao for Hamnet, Joachim Trier for Sentimental Value, Jafar Panahi for It Was Just an Accident, and Josh Safdie for Marty Supreme, with Ryan Coogler right there, number 6. And Guillermo del Toro, he has popped up here and there. He missed the BAFTA long list, which I think is like just a big red flag, honestly. And again, I don't think Frankenstein is too strong in terms of above the line recognition. I know he's fairly beloved by the director's branch, but I don't think enough, and I don't think with a strong enough film to get him over the line with such a strong like directors lineup this year. So Another wild card, if The Secret Agent has a truly insane day, Kleber Mendonça Filho, maybe, but I don't think so. I think we're really between those 6, and we got to see which 5 get read off. And here's the thing with when they read Best Director too, and I'm gonna remember this year because I always forget every year. They read the name first, but they do the order in alphabetical order of the movie, and I always forget that. So like, the first name we should be seeing no matter what, unless Guillermo gets in, that'd be, Guillermo del Toro for Frankenstein, so that's an F, but it should be like Chloe Zhao, Hamnet, and then like Jafar Panahi. It was just an accident. So I got to remember that because it always throws me off every year and confuses me a little bit. But yeah, so that's Best Director, and we'll see what happens. All right, and lastly, Best Picture. So we've got 10 slots. I think we have 7 that are incredibly solid. Those 7 being One Battle After Another, Sinners, Hamnet, Marty Supreme, Sentimental Value, Frankenstein, and Begonia. They've all shown up like where they need to. One Battle, Sinners, Hamnet, Marty Supreme, Frankenstein, Begonia, all on PGA. Sentimental Value not there, but not I'm sorry. Sentimental Value was on there. It's the only international film that showed up on PGA. So all 7 of those on the PGA 10. Other like precursor Best Picture list we can look at. We can look at AFI, the American Film Institute. We got Begonia, Frankenstein, Hamnet, Marty Supreme, One Battle, Sinners. Don't have Sentimental Value on there, but that's okay because it's the American Film Institute. We also have the National Board of Review that we can look at, where we've got One Battle, which won, and then we got Marty Supreme, Sinners, and that's it actually. NBR was a little bit weird this year. They had like Wake Up Dead Man and Avatar and Jay Kelly and Rental Family. But those 7, between those places they've shown up, the other nominations that they're going to be picking up, I think I would be incredibly shocked if any of these 7 do not make it into the Best Picture. Begonia was a very recent rise for me, honestly. I didn't even have it in my 10 until like last week, and then I was looking at all the Guild nominations, and I'm like, oh my god, it fucking has Guild nominations everywhere. Like it has HMMA for score. It's got Costume Guild. It's got set decorators. It's got art directors. It's got 2 SAG Actor Award nominations. It's got PGA. It's got motion picture sound editors, makeup artists and hairstylist guild, MUA, like Society of Composers, like it's everywhere. And I was like, I can't deny this anymore. Like all the guilds love it. It's gonna pick up enough nominations. Like it's definitely getting in. There's no way. So now we got to fill out 8, 9, and 10. So as semi-safe, I have The Secret Agent at number 8. I think with the 2 major international film wins at Critics' Choice and at Golden Globes, it's solidified. It's almost like solidified here in the Best Picture 10. It bringing along Wagner Moura, the Brazilian Passion Boat. We saw how that worked out well for I'm Still Here last year. So I got it at number 8. Number 9, I have It Was Just an Accident. I have Jafar in Best Director. Is it possible where he gets Best Director without the Best Picture nomination and it's just an international feature? Definitely. Like that could totally happen. The directors could really go out for him, but then, the overall Academy just doesn't vote It Was Just an Accident well enough in Best Picture to get it there. But I do have it getting in. It's just something about that Palme d'Or win and just all the buzz it has and what that film stands for, with the way it was created and everything, I think gets itself in. And then number 10, I've got 2 circling that final spot between F1 and Train Dreams. And right now I am predicting F1 to take that final slot. I think it has enough. Sometimes you'll have a film that gets a good handful of craft nominations, but not necessarily a Best Picture nomination, right? Which could be the case for F1. I've got it in sound, visual effects, editing. I think that was it, right? Sound, visual effects, teetering on score, or not teetering on score, but like as they're on score, teetering on song. So yeah, I mean, like sound, visual effects editing is enough, and then I've got it like right there for cinematography as a potential on the bubble as well. And it's at like all the guilds. Even if you look at like set decorators and art directors, it's there in the contemporary categories. It's really showing up everywhere. It's on the PGA list. And I do think that overall it will have enough to get there. And like I feel like we don't it feels like we're missing a type of movie if we don't have F1 in here. With the fact of Avatar Fire and Ash getting booted, Wicked for Good getting booted, like, it just feels like we're missing something, and I feel like F1 fits that bill, like, if that makes any sense. But then, we also have Train Dreams, which I have right there at, like, number 11, which fits another bill of, like, the very quiet, subtle indie pick, like, where nothing else here really fits that. Like, Hamnet and Sentimental Value are, like, kind of quiet and subtle, but also not. Like, they are pretty intense in a lot of moments. Um, where Train Dreams fits that bill a little bit more, could have some significant pickup nominations in, I've got it in adapted screenplay and cinematography. So I think F1 and Train Dreams are really circling that final spot right now. Potential spoilers, Weapons, if they have a crazy morning between getting that PGA nomination, the fact that it could pick up more than just Amy Madigan as a nomination on Thursday morning. That'll be a thing to look out for. Like if it gets screenplay, if it gets editing, it's like, oh my God, it's getting Best Picture. Which would be cool, because we don't have a horror film. Well, we do. I guess it depends what you consider Sinners. Like if you really consider that a horror film or not. Um, but we don't have like a true like genre horror film necessarily in here right now. Which we've been getting as of late in some years. And then, I got Wicked for Good out there as a potential spoiler as well. I really don't think it is happening at this point. I just don't see like anybody putting that above like number 6 on their ballot, and that just doesn't bode well for getting in here. Crazy wildcard picks. I think either No Other Choice or Surratt. Likely swapped for one of the internationals, either Secret Agent or It Was Just an Accident. I do have 3 international films getting in with my Best Picture 10, which we have never had before. We've maxed out at 2 the past couple years. So 3 would be, another historical moment. It'd be a cool moment. I do not think we're getting 4. So like those are not both getting in. If anything, they're swapping out for one or the other. But yeah, so my final predictions for Best Picture are One Battle After Another, Sinners, Hamnet, Marty Supreme, Sentimental Value, Frankenstein, Begonia, The Secret Agent, It Was Just an Accident, and F1. If you've made it to the end of this video, congrats and thank you for sticking along. So I did a quick tally just to see like where I've got everybody at in terms of potential total nominations. Didn't realize with my current predictions, I have One Battle smashing the record with getting 16, if all of mine are correct. And then, so that would beat the record by 2 because the current record is still 14. Then I've got Sinners with 13 nominations, Hamnet with 10, Marty Supreme with 9, and Frankenstein with 9. So we'll see what happens. Again, I think there's some things very much on the edge. I think some of the craft categories I've got One Battle in right now might not be as safe as I think. And I know I have some at like 4 or 5 anyway. So maybe the 16 happens. Maybe this is the film that does it, that everyone just goes so fucking nuts for that it finally breaks the 14 record. That, La La Land last kind of tied back a decade ago. Maybe Sinners picks up a couple extra ones. Like I said, I think Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan are people that are like right there on the edge. Add them in, that's 15. That's the record there too. Yeah, and then like, the tally with like Hamnet, Marty Supreme, and Frankenstein seems pretty accurate for what those films are and what they could do. So we will have to see. So if you're able, be sure to tune in to the Oscars nomination announcement happening this Thursday, the 22nd at 8:30 a.m. Eastern, 5:30 a.m. Pacific. They will be announced by Danielle Brooks and Lewis Pullman. Excited to see them present. And ABC even has a little schedule because they always do like handful of categories right away and then a little break and then the rest. So right away at 8:30 Eastern, not in order, but we will get supporting actor and actress, animated short, live action short, costume design, hair and makeup, original score, and both of the screenplay categories. And then the rest will come after that break. So, God, like I said during my supporting actress predictions, I bet that'll be the first fucking category. I'm going to have a stroke. But all right. Well, thank you all so much. I'm going to go ahead and edit this very long video to try and make it a little more palpable, but hopefully you enjoy. Leave some comments. Please subscribe. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at And the Gooby Goes To as well. And we will see you on Thursday evening when I post my live reactions to the Oscar nominations. All right, y'all. Have a great night. Thank you.